I found out that my husband used my money to fund his second family. The pharmacy called to say my daughter's insulin prescription had been canceled while I was wiring my husband another $4,000 for her medical expenses. I was standing in my office in Dubai. It was 2 a.m. local time, and the pharmacist back home in Ohio was telling me that the account holder had terminated all prescriptions 3 weeks ago. What account holder? My husband Craig handles all of Emma's medications. I'm the account holder on file, ma'am. The insurance was switched to a different plan that doesn't cover this pharmacy. We can't fill her prescriptions anymore. Emma is 8 years old and has type 1 diabetes. She needs insulin to live. This has to be a mistake. Let me call my husband. The pharmacist gave me the new insurance information before I hung up. Policyholder, Craig and Tessa Brennan. Tessa. Who the hell is Tessa? Craig answered on the 5th ring. Sounded like I woke him up. The pharmacy says Emma's insulin was canceled. What's going on? There was shuffling, whispering in the background. Oh, that. Yeah, we switched pharmacies. Found a cheaper one across town. Don't worry about it. Who's we? What? You said we switched pharmacies. Who is we? Just me and Emma? Slip of the tongue. I'm tired. You know Emma's routine is critical for her condition. Why didn't you tell me about changing pharmacies? Craig's voice got defensive. You're not here dealing with this every day. I am. I make the decisions about her care. I've been sending you $6,000 a month for expenses. That should cover the best pharmacy in the state. Where is that money going? Silence. Then a woman's voice in the background asking who was calling. Craig, who is that? Nobody. Wrong number. Go back to sleep. He was talking to someone else. Craig, I can hear her. Who is in my house? Your house? You haven't been here in 14 months. This is my house now. I took this contract in Dubai to pay for Emma's treatment after you lost your job. The plan was 1 year, maybe 18 months maximum. Then I'd come home. You told me to stay longer because Emma was doing better with the stable routine. I stayed because you said it was best for her. Craig laughed. It was best for everyone. Listen, Emma's fine. She's sleeping. I'll handle the pharmacy thing tomorrow. I hung up and called my neighbor Deb. She answered immediately despite the time difference. Deb, I need you to drive by my house right now. Tell me what you see. 20 minutes later, she called back. There's a woman's car in your driveway. Craig's car is there too. Deb, I need you to knock on the door. Say you need to borrow something. See who answers. The silence stretched for 10 minutes. A woman answered. Said she was Tessa Brennan. Said she lives there with her husband Craig. I was already booking a flight home. The first available seat was in 9 hours. I landed 15 hours later. Deb picked me up from the airport and drove me straight to my house. My key didn't work. The locks had been changed. I rang the doorbell. Craig answered in his boxers. His face went from confusion to panic in seconds. Behind him stood a woman in my bathrobe, the monogrammed one my mother gave me for Christmas. Hello, Craig. Where's my daughter? She's at school. It's Saturday. No school on Saturday. Try again. She's at dance class. Emma doesn't take dance. She takes piano. Remember? Or did you cancel that too when you stole her college fund? How did you know about that? The bank statements you forgot I can access online. $73,000 transferred to a joint account with Tessa Brennan. That money was for Emma's future. Craig stepped outside and closed the door behind him. You weren't supposed to come back yet. Your contract runs another 6 months. My contract ended when you remarried while married to me. That's bigamy. That's prison time. Tessa opened the door. Craig, what's going on? Who is this? I'm his wife. His legal, actual wife. And I want my daughter. Now. Tessa's face crumbled. He told me the divorce was final. He showed me papers. Forged papers, apparently. Just like the forged divorce filing that was never processed because it needs both signatures. Craig tried to push me off the porch. You need to leave. This is my house. Check the deed. This is in my name only. Inherited from my grandmother. You were never on it. Remember? You said you didn't need to be because we were partners. Emma came running up the driveway from the neighbor's house where she'd been playing. She saw me and stopped. Daddy said you were working forever away. Not forever, baby. I'm home now. Craig grabbed Emma's hand. Go inside with Tessa. Emma pulled away and ran to me. Tessa was crying on the porch. You said she abandoned them. You said she didn't want them. Craig looked between us. It's not what it looks like. The police arrived 20 minutes later. Tessa had called them to remove me from her property. The officers ran the ownership records. They said, Ma'am, this is not your house. The officer turned to Tessa and pulled out his tablet. He tapped the screen and showed her the property records. The house belonged to me, inherited from my grandmother in 2018, never transferred to joint ownership. Tessa's face went white as she read the screen. The second officer asked for my driver's license and compared the name on the deed to my ID. Everything matched. He looked at Craig with obvious disgust. The first officer told Tessa she had no legal standing to request my removal from my own property. Tessa started crying harder, and Craig put his hand on her shoulder, but she shrugged him off. I asked the officers if they could stay while I packed some things for Emma. The first officer nodded and said they'd wait to make sure the situation stayed calm. Craig tried to follow me through the front door, but the second officer stepped in front of him. The officer explained this was a domestic situation now, and Craig needed to give me space to gather my daughter's belongings without interference. Craig's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue with the cop. Tessa sat down on the porch steps with her head in her hands, still wearing my bathrobe. I walked into my house and it felt wrong, like someone had rearranged everything while I was gone. New throw pillows on the couch, different curtains in the living room, photos of Craig and Tessa on the mantel where our wedding pictures used to be. I forced myself to focus and headed upstairs to Emma's room. Emma was sitting on her bed holding her stuffed elephant. She looked up at me with tears running down her face. I sat down next to her and she immediately threw her arms around me. She buried her face in my shoulder and whispered that she missed me so much. Her voice was muffled against my shirt. I asked if she was really staying this time and I felt my throat get tight. I promised her I was never leaving her again, that I was home for good. I started pulling clothes from her dresser, checking sizes because kids grow so fast in 14 months. Emma helped me pack her backpack with her favorite stuffed animals, the elephant and a bear and a raggedy bunny she'd had since she was 2. I grabbed her school supplies from her desk and her medication kit from the bathroom. The insulin supplies were running low, which made sense if Craig hadn't been refilling prescriptions properly. I checked the dates on the insulin pens and my stomach dropped. 2 of them were expired. Craig had been giving Emma expired insulin. I shoved them in the bag anyway as evidence and made a mental note to get to a pharmacy first thing tomorrow. Emma asked what was happening and why we were packing. I told her we were going to stay at Miss Deb's house tonight while Mommy figured some things out. She asked if Daddy was coming too, and I said no, just us. She seemed relieved. We came back downstairs and the officers were still on the porch with Craig and Tessa. The first officer suggested I take Emma somewhere safe for the night while I sorted out the legal situation. Deb appeared from next door before I could even ask. She said Emma and I could stay in her guest room as long as we needed. She helped me carry Emma's backpack and the bag of clothes and medications. Craig watched from the porch but didn't say anything. He probably realized that anything he said in front of the cops would make things worse for him. Tessa was still crying and I almost felt bad for her. But then I remembered she was sleeping in my house, wearing my clothes, playing stepmother to my daughter. We walked next door to Deb's house and she showed us to the guest room. It had 2 twin beds with matching floral bedspreads. Emma immediately climbed into one and hugged her elephant. Deb brought us towels and said she'd make up some dinner. I thanked her and meant it. Without Deb's help tonight, I don't know what I would have done. Emma fell asleep around 9, exhausted from the emotional chaos of the day. I tucked her in and kissed her forehead, then took my laptop to Deb's kitchen table. I logged into our bank accounts, the ones I thought were just mine and Craig's. The checking account showed the deposits I'd been making from Dubai, $6,000 on the first of every month like clockwork. But the withdrawals made no sense. Craig was spending $8,000 or $9,000 every month. I opened the savings account where Emma's college fund had been. The balance showed $847. It had been $73,000 when I left for Dubai. I pulled up the transaction history and saw the transfer to a joint account with Tessa Brennan dated 4 months ago. $72,000 moved in one transaction. I felt sick. I kept digging through statements and found more problems. Craig had opened a credit card with Capital One in my name. The balance was $12,000 and it was 3 months past due. Another card with Chase showed $9,500. A Discover card had $10,800. I'd never applied for any of these cards. The statements were going to a P.O. box address I didn't recognize. My credit score had probably been destroyed while I was overseas working myself to death to support my family. I added up the credit card debt and it came to $32,300. Combined with the stolen college fund, Craig had burned through over $100,000 of my money in 15 months. The clock on the laptop showed 3 a.m. My eyes hurt from staring at the screen, but I kept going. I found the insurance documents in my email archives. Craig had added himself and Tessa to a new policy through my employer, somehow using my credentials to enroll them as dependents. He listed Tessa as his spouse and forged my signature on the enrollment forms. Then he canceled Emma's prescriptions on our old plan and moved her to the new plan. But the new plan had a $5,000 deductible that Craig never paid, so Emma's insulin wasn't actually covered. She'd been without proper medication for 3 weeks because Craig was too busy playing house with Tessa to handle his daughter's life-threatening medical condition. I wanted to drive back to my house and scream at him, but Emma was sleeping in the next room and I couldn't leave her. Morning finally came and I hadn't slept at all. Deb made scrambled eggs and toast while I called my supervisor in Dubai. I explained there was a family emergency and I needed to come home permanently. My supervisor was understanding and said she'd process my leave request right away. The contract would end without completion, which meant I'd lose the bonus I was supposed to get for finishing the full 18 months, but I didn't care. Emma needed me here and I wasn't leaving her in Craig's care for one more day. Deb set a plate in front of me and told me to eat something. Emma came out of the guest room rubbing her eyes. She sat at the table and started drawing pictures on the paper Deb gave her. I watched her carefully include me in every family picture she drew, even though I'd been gone for over a year. While Emma ate breakfast, I searched for family law attorneys in Ohio on my laptop. I needed someone who handled emergency custody situations and could move fast. I found Ingrid Holloway's name on several top-rated lists for family law. Her website said she specialized in high-conflict custody cases and had experience with fraud situations. I called her office and explained to the receptionist that I needed an emergency consultation. I mentioned my daughter had medical needs, there was possible bigamy involved, and forged divorce papers. The receptionist's voice changed from professional to concerned. She said they could squeeze me in that same afternoon at 2 o'clock. I took the appointment and felt the first small bit of hope since the pharmacy had called yesterday. I had evidence, I had my daughter, and now I had a lawyer who might be able to help me fight back. Ingrid's office was on the 3rd floor of a brick building downtown. I walked in at exactly 2 o'clock carrying my laptop and a folder stuffed with printed bank statements. The receptionist led me to a conference room where Ingrid was waiting. She looked about 40 with short dark hair and sharp eyes that took in everything. I spread the evidence across the table and she started going through it piece by piece. She picked up the bank statements first and studied the transfers to the joint account with Tessa. Then she looked at the credit card statements showing the $32,000 in debt Craig racked up in my name. Her expression got more serious with each document. She asked me to walk her through the timeline, and I explained everything from taking the Dubai job, to discovering the prescription cancellation, to finding Tessa in my house wearing my bathrobe. Ingrid made notes on a legal pad and asked specific questions about Craig's access to my personal information and how he managed to forge documents. When I showed her the insurance enrollment forms with my forged signature, she stopped writing and looked up. This isn't just a custody issue. Your husband committed multiple felonies: bigamy, identity theft, insurance fraud, credit card fraud. And the fact that he endangered your daughter's medical care by canceling her insulin coverage could constitute child endangerment. She explained that we'd file for emergency custody in family court, but that the criminal charges would proceed separately. The prosecutor's office would handle that once she made the referrals. She could file the emergency motions tomorrow morning, and given Emma's medical situation, we'd likely get a hearing within days instead of weeks. Judges take child welfare extremely seriously, especially when there's documented medical neglect. I asked what Craig might face if convicted, and Ingrid said each charge carried different penalties, but combined he was looking at potential prison time, not just probation. She agreed to take my case right there and said she'd start drafting the emergency motions that evening. My phone rang while Ingrid was making copies of my documents. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. I answered, and a woman introduced herself as Bianca from the Insurance Fraud Investigation Unit. She said my employer's insurance company had flagged Craig's enrollment of Tessa as suspicious and launched an investigation 3 weeks ago. They'd been trying to reach me in Dubai, but I'd already left. Bianca needed my statement and any documentation I had about the fraudulent enrollment. I looked at Ingrid and she nodded. I told Bianca I was at my attorney's office right now and could meet with her. She said she could be there in 30 minutes. Ingrid cleared her schedule and we waited. Bianca arrived with a briefcase and a digital recorder. She was younger than I expected, maybe 30, with blonde hair pulled back tight. She set up the recorder and asked me to describe everything I knew about Craig's insurance fraud. I went through the whole story again while she took notes. Then I showed her the enrollment forms with my forged signature and the policy documents listing Craig and Tessa as my dependents. Bianca's eyes lit up when she saw those. She explained that insurance fraud was a felony in Ohio, and Craig's scheme was particularly bold. He'd enrolled a fake spouse using my employment credentials, submitted false marriage documentation to the insurance company, and used the fraudulent coverage to get medical care for both himself and Tessa. The insurance company had paid out thousands in claims based on Craig's lies. Bianca said the company would pursue criminal charges independently of whatever I decided to do in civil court. They had their own legal team, and this case was a priority because fraud like this drives up premiums for everyone. She asked if I'd be willing to testify if it went to trial, and I said absolutely. Bianca packed up her recorder and thanked me. She said the prosecutor's office would be in touch soon. The investigation was solid, and they had more than enough evidence to charge Craig. I got back to Deb's house around 6 that evening. Emma was doing homework at the kitchen table and Deb was making spaghetti. My phone started ringing. Craig's number. I ignored it. It rang again 2 minutes later. Then again. Deb looked at me and asked if I was going to answer. I let it ring 4 more times before I finally picked up. Craig started talking immediately. Listen, I know you're upset, but we need to talk about this rationally. I was lonely. You were gone for over a year. Tessa made me feel appreciated and valued. You can't understand what it's like being home alone taking care of everything while you're living it up overseas. I cut him off. Living it up? I was working 16-hour days in a foreign country to pay for our daughter's medical care because you lost your job. I sent you $6,000 every month. You stole Emma's college fund. You forged my signature on legal documents and insurance forms. You committed bigamy. Craig's voice got defensive. The bigamy thing is complicated. I thought we were basically done anyway. You weren't coming back. I told him my attorney would be filing for emergency custody tomorrow morning, and that he needed to get himself a lawyer too, because the criminal charges were coming. The insurance company was already pursuing fraud charges, and the prosecutor's office would be adding more. The line went silent for a long moment. Then Craig said I was overreacting and hung up. I set my phone down and my hands were shaking. Deb squeezed my shoulder and told me I did the right thing. Emma looked up from her homework and asked if that was Daddy. I said yes, and tried to smile at her. Later that night after dinner, Emma came into the guest room where I was working on my laptop. She climbed onto the bed next to me and asked why we were staying at Miss Deb's house instead of going home. I closed the laptop and pulled her close. I explained as gently as I could that Daddy made some bad choices and we needed to figure out where everyone should live for a while. Emma was quiet for a minute. Then she asked if it was because of Tessa. My chest tightened. I asked what she knew about Tessa. Emma said Tessa had been living with them for a long time. Since last summer, maybe. Daddy told her that Tessa was his new friend, and that I didn't want to come home anymore because I had a better life in Dubai. Emma said she knew something was wrong because Daddy kept telling her not to mention Tessa when we talked on video calls. She'd wanted to ask me about it, but Daddy said it would make me sad. I held Emma tighter and told her that none of this was her fault. Daddy lied to both of us. I never wanted to stay away, and I definitely didn't have a better life without her. I was working so hard overseas because I loved her and wanted to make sure she had everything she needed. Emma asked if Daddy was in trouble, and I said yes, he was. But that didn't change the fact that he loved her. Grown-ups sometimes make terrible choices even when they love their kids. Emma nodded against my shoulder and we sat there quietly for a while. The next morning, I met Ingrid at the courthouse. She'd drafted the emergency motions overnight and we filed them first thing. The clerk processed the paperwork and said a hearing date would be set within 72 hours, given the emergency nature and Emma's medical needs. Ingrid explained that was incredibly fast but appropriate. The judge would review the evidence and Craig's actions and make a temporary custody determination. Given the documented medical neglect, the financial fraud, and the bigamy situation, Ingrid was confident we'd get temporary full custody, with supervised visitation for Craig at most. She said judges took child welfare very seriously, and Craig's pattern of behavior showed he couldn't be trusted with Emma's care. The court would also likely grant me exclusive use of the house since it was in my name, and I needed a stable place for Emma. Craig would be ordered to move out. We'd have a follow-up hearing in 30 days to make the arrangements more permanent, but Ingrid expected the temporary order to become the final custody arrangement. I asked what happened if Craig didn't follow the court orders. Ingrid said any violation would result in immediate arrest for contempt. The court didn't mess around with custody violations. I took Emma to her regular pediatrician that afternoon. Dr. Matthews had been treating Emma's diabetes since diagnosis 3 years ago. She did a full examination and checked Emma's blood sugar levels. Then she asked about the prescription situation. I explained that Craig had switched insurance plans without telling me, and Emma had been without proper coverage for 3 weeks. Dr. Matthews' face went tight. She said that was completely unacceptable for a child with type 1 diabetes. Missing or inconsistent insulin could cause serious complications or even be life-threatening. She immediately wrote new prescriptions for Emma's insulin, test strips, and other supplies. We went straight to the pharmacy, and I paid the $800 bill without insurance coverage. It hurt to spend that much, but I was just grateful Emma could finally get proper care again. Dr. Matthews had given me enough samples to last until the prescriptions were ready. I watched the pharmacist count out the insulin pens and felt relief wash over me. Emma would be okay. I could make sure of that now. Dr. Matthews called me the next morning. She'd spent the evening documenting Emma's complete medical history and the gaps in her prescription records over the past 3 weeks. She'd noted every missed refill and the potential health risks Craig's negligence created. This documentation would be crucial for the custody hearing. She said she'd be happy to testify if needed about the importance of consistent diabetes care and the dangers of interrupting treatment. Then she gave me a referral to Madeline, a child psychologist who specialized in helping kids process family problems and parental separation. Dr. Matthews said Emma would benefit from having someone to talk to about everything that was happening. The divorce and custody situation would be confusing and potentially traumatic. Madeline could help Emma develop healthy coping strategies. I called Madeline's office and scheduled an appointment for the following week. The receptionist said Madeline had experience with cases involving parental conflict and medical neglect. She'd be able to assess Emma's emotional state and provide ongoing support through the transition. Craig showed up at Deb's house that afternoon around 3. I heard his car pull into the driveway and looked out the window. He was getting out and heading for the front door. I told Emma to go to her room and close the door. Deb called the police before answering his knock. Craig stood on the porch and said he wanted to see his daughter. Deb told him to wait and close the door. The police arrived within 10 minutes. 2 officers got out and approached Craig in the driveway. I went outside and explained the situation. I'd filed for emergency custody that morning and had physical custody of Emma currently. Craig started arguing that he was her father and had rights. The officers asked if there was a custody order in place yet. I said the hearing was scheduled, but the temporary situation was that Emma was with me. One officer turned to Craig and explained that until the custody hearing, he needed to stay away unless I agreed to supervised visits. Craig's face went red. He said this was ridiculous. He lived with Emma for over a year while I was overseas. The officers remained calm. They reminded him that I was also Emma's parent and currently had physical custody. If he wanted visitation, he needed to go through proper legal channels. Showing up at someone else's house and demanding access wasn't the right approach. They suggested he contact his attorney. Craig glared at me and got back in his car. He peeled out of the driveway too fast. Tessa called my phone that evening around 8. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Her voice was shaky. She said she'd been doing research and realized Craig lied to her about everything. The divorce was never finalized because it was never filed. His financial situation was completely fabricated. He'd even lied about his employment history. She'd found out he was fired from his last job for stealing, not laid off like he told her. Tessa sounded devastated. She asked if we could talk in person. She wanted to explain her side and apologize. I wasn't ready to feel sympathy for her yet. Part of me was still angry that she never questioned why a supposedly divorced man's ex-wife was sending him $6,000 monthly. But I called Ingrid before responding. Ingrid said Tessa's cooperation could strengthen the case against Craig significantly. If Tessa was willing to provide statements about Craig's lies and his negligent care of Emma, it would corroborate everything I was saying. Ingrid advised me to meet with Tessa, but to keep it focused on gathering information for the legal case. I told Tessa I'd meet her the next morning at a coffee shop downtown. She thanked me and her voice cracked. I hung up and sat there staring at my phone. Everything was moving so fast. Just 3 days ago, I was in Dubai thinking my family was waiting for me at home. Now I was building a legal case against my husband with help from his other wife. The next morning, I dropped Emma at the school and drove to the coffee shop downtown. Tessa was already there in a corner booth with a manila folder on the table. She looked like she had not slept much. Her eyes were red and she kept twisting a napkin in her hands. I sat down across from her without ordering anything. She pushed the folder toward me and told me everything was inside. I opened it and saw the forged divorce papers first. They looked official with stamps and signatures, but I knew they were fake because I never signed anything. The marriage certificate between Craig and Tessa was dated 6 months ago. I flipped through bank statements showing withdrawals from the joint account Craig opened with my stolen money. $4,000 for a wedding venue, $3,000 for a honeymoon in Florida, $1,200 for wedding rings. He used my money to marry someone else while I was working overseas to support our daughter. Tessa watched me read through everything and said she had no idea any of it was fraud. She thought Craig was divorced and financially stable. The anger in my chest felt hot, but I kept my voice steady. I asked her why she never questioned why his ex-wife was sending him $6,000 every month. Tessa looked down at her coffee and admitted she should have asked more questions. Craig told her I was wealthy and felt guilty about the divorce, so I overpaid child support. It sounded stupid now, but she believed him at the time. I closed the folder and asked Tessa how they met. She explained it was at a support group for people who lost their jobs 8 months ago. Craig seemed kind and understanding about her situation. He told her he was divorced with a daughter whose mother worked in Dubai and sent money for the child. He had the house and a car and seemed to have his life together. They started dating after a few weeks and got married quickly because Craig said he did not want to waste time when he found the right person. Tessa said she met Emma several times, and the little girl seemed sweet, but confused about where her mother was. I leaned forward and asked Tessa about Emma's medical care. How often did Craig check her blood sugar? Did he give her insulin on schedule? Did he take her to doctor appointments? Tessa's face changed and she looked uncomfortable. She admitted Craig was not good about Emma's medication schedule. Tessa had to remind him constantly about insulin doses and blood sugar checks. Craig would forget or say he would do it later, and Tessa ended up handling most of Emma's medical needs. She took Emma to 3 different doctor appointments because Craig could not be bothered to take time off. One time, Emma's blood sugar dropped really low at the school, and the nurse called Craig, but he did not answer, so they called Tessa instead. She picked Emma up and got her stabilized. This information made my hands shake. Craig put Emma's life at risk through his carelessness. I asked Tessa if she would be willing to tell all of this to my attorney and to the prosecutor handling Craig's criminal case. Tessa nodded immediately and said she would do whatever helped Emma. She was horrified to realize she was technically guilty of bigamy herself, even though she had no idea. I told her what Ingrid said about victims of marriage fraud not usually being prosecuted. Tessa just wanted to get away from this whole situation and move on with her life. She planned to move back to her parents' house in Pennsylvania and start over. I took the folder and thanked her for meeting me. It felt strange thanking the woman who lived in my house and wore my bathrobe, but she was a victim of Craig's lies too. 3 days later, the emergency custody hearing arrived. I sat next to Ingrid in the courtroom wearing my best professional clothes. Craig walked in with a public defender who looked young and unprepared. He carried a thin folder and kept checking his watch. Ingrid had 3 thick binders of evidence organized by category. The judge called the hearing to order and Ingrid stood to present our case. She walked through everything in careful detail. The financial fraud with bank statements showing the stolen college fund. The insurance cancellation that left Emma without proper medication coverage. The bigamy with both marriage certificates and Tessa's statement. The medical neglect documented by Emma's pediatrician. Craig's attorney objected a few times, but the judge overruled him each time. Craig sat there getting paler as Ingrid presented each piece of evidence. His attorney finally stood up when it was his turn and argued that I abandoned my family by taking the job in Dubai. He said Craig was just trying to provide stability for Emma while I chose my career over my daughter. Ingrid immediately countered by showing my employment contract with the clear purpose of paying Emma's medical expenses after Craig lost his job. She presented copies of every monthly transfer of $6,000 I sent for their care. She showed emails where I asked about Emma's health, and Craig reassured me everything was fine. The judge looked at Craig's attorney and said the evidence showed I took the job specifically to support my family financially. That was not abandonment. Craig's attorney sat down looking defeated. The judge then reviewed the preliminary psychological assessment from Madeline. She noted that Emma showed signs of emotional confusion and had been told conflicting stories about why her mother was away. The judge looked directly at Craig and asked him why he told Emma her mother did not want her. Craig stammered something about Emma asking questions and him not knowing what to say. The judge's expression showed he was not impressed with that answer. Emma did not have to testify, which I was grateful for. After reviewing all the evidence, the judge made his ruling. He granted me temporary full custody with supervised visitation for Craig. I was also granted exclusive use of the house, and Craig was ordered to move out within 48 hours. The judge scheduled a follow-up hearing in 30 days but said clearly that the temporary order would likely become permanent given the severity of Craig's actions. Craig's face turned red as the judge explained the order. He started to stand up and argue, but his attorney grabbed his arm and pulled him back down. The judge warned Craig that any violation of the custody order would result in immediate arrest. Craig shoved his chair back and stormed out of the courtroom without looking at me. His attorney gathered his papers quickly and followed him out. Ingrid squeezed my shoulder and said we did well. That afternoon, I picked Emma up from the school and drove her home to our house. Craig had already been there and removed his belongings. His clothes were gone from the closet. His toiletries were missing from the bathroom. The garage had an empty space where his tools used to be. Emma walked through each room, slowly looking at the gaps where his things had been. She stopped in the living room and asked if Daddy was coming back. I knelt down next to her and told her Daddy would visit sometimes, but he would not live here anymore. This was still her home, and we were going to make it feel safe and happy again. Emma nodded and asked if we could rearrange her room to make it feel different. I said yes, and we spent the rest of the afternoon moving furniture and hanging up new posters she picked out. By bedtime, Emma seemed calmer and she fell asleep holding my hand. The next week, a prosecutor named Tristan called my cell phone while I was making Emma breakfast. He introduced himself as the assistant prosecutor assigned to Craig's criminal case. He needed my full cooperation and wanted to schedule a meeting as soon as possible. The charges being considered included bigamy, identity theft, insurance fraud, and credit card fraud. Each charge carried potential prison time. Tristan said the evidence looked strong based on what the police and insurance investigators had already gathered. I agreed to meet him that afternoon at his office downtown. Emma went to the school and I drove to the county courthouse complex. Tristan's office was small and packed with file boxes. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with a serious expression. He shook my hand and gestured to a chair across from his desk. I brought copies of everything I had gathered: bank statements showing the transferred college fund, credit card bills for accounts opened in my name, the forged divorce papers Craig showed Tessa, insurance documents showing the fraudulent enrollment. Tristan went through each document carefully, making notes on a legal pad. He was particularly interested in the forged divorce documents and the fraudulent insurance enrollment. He explained that Craig's pattern of deception showed criminal intent rather than simple mistakes. The prosecutor's office was taking this seriously because it involved both financial crimes and child welfare. Tristan said Emma's medical needs and the prescription cancellation demonstrated that Craig's actions directly endangered a child. That made everything worse from a legal standpoint. He asked detailed questions about the timeline. When did I leave for Dubai? When did Craig lose his job? When did the money transfer start? When did I first notice something wrong? I answered everything as clearly as I could, sticking to facts and dates. Tristan recorded our conversation and took extensive notes. The meeting lasted almost 3 hours. A few days later, Ingrid called to say she had hired a forensic accountant named Liam to trace all the stolen money. Liam worked for a firm that specialized in financial fraud cases. He would need access to all my bank records, credit card statements, and any other financial documents I could provide. I spent an entire evening gathering paperwork and scanning documents. Liam called me the next day to confirm he received everything. His voice was calm and professional. He said the initial review showed significant irregularities, and he would have a preliminary report within a week. When the report arrived, Ingrid scheduled a meeting at her office to review the findings. Liam joined us via video call. His report was over 40 pages long, filled with spreadsheets and transaction records. He walked us through his findings methodically. Craig didn't just spend my money on Tessa and daily expenses, he also gambled online extensively. Liam found accounts on 3 different gambling websites with transaction histories going back 14 months. Craig lost over $30,000 betting on sports and playing online poker. He also made several bad investment decisions. He put $15,000 into a cryptocurrency scheme that collapsed. He invested $12,000 in a friend's business that never got off the ground. The $73,000 from Emma's college fund was almost completely gone. Scattered across failed schemes, gambling losses, and Craig's poor judgment, Liam traced every dollar with receipts and bank records. The documentation was overwhelming and depressing. Liam's final report showed that Craig spent approximately $140,000 of my money over 15 months. Between the college fund, the monthly deposits I sent, and the credit cards opened in my name, Craig burned through more than I earned during my entire Dubai contract. The financial devastation was staggering. Liam broke it down by category. $73,000 from the college fund, $72,000 from my monthly transfers of $6,000, $32,000 from fraudulent credit cards. Some of that went to legitimate household expenses and Emma's care. But most of it funded Craig's lifestyle with Tessa, his gambling habit, and his failed investments. Liam estimated that only about $40,000 actually went toward Emma's medical care and necessary household costs. The rest was wasted or stolen for Craig's benefit. Ingrid made copies of the report for the prosecutor and for the divorce proceedings. She said this level of financial abuse would definitely impact the divorce settlement and custody arrangements. I filed for divorce officially that same week. Ingrid handled all the paperwork. Ohio law requires a waiting period before a divorce can be finalized. But given the bigamy situation, Ingrid believed we could expedite the process. She filed a motion to fast-track based on Craig's criminal charges and the fraudulent second marriage. I wanted this marriage legally ended as quickly as possible, so I could start rebuilding our financial life. Ingrid explained that the divorce would address custody, child support, property division, and debt responsibility. Since Craig was facing criminal charges, she expected minimal resistance from his side. His public defender had already indicated Craig wouldn't contest the divorce terms. Signing the divorce petition felt surreal. Ending a marriage on paper after everything that happened. But it was necessary. I couldn't move forward while still legally tied to Craig. Emma started regular sessions with Madeline, the child psychologist, the following week. The first session was just Madeline and me. She asked about Emma's history, the family situation, and what Emma knew about everything happening. I explained as much as I could without breaking down. Madeline listened carefully and took notes. She said Emma would need time to process her confusion about why Daddy lied and where Tessa went. The second session included Emma. Madeline's office had toys and art supplies. She used play therapy and age-appropriate explanations to help Emma understand that adult problems weren't her fault. Emma was quiet at first, but gradually opened up. She drew pictures of our family. She asked Madeline questions about divorce and why people lie. Madeline answered honestly but gently. Progress was slow but steady. After the third session, Madeline told me Emma was doing better than expected given the circumstances. She recommended continuing weekly sessions for at least 3 months. My employer in Dubai called during Emma's 4th therapy session. I stepped outside to take the call. My supervisor said the company understood my situation and wanted to help. They were offering me a remote position, so I could work from home while caring for Emma. The salary was less than the overseas contract, about 30% less. But it allowed me to stay with Emma and maintain income while the legal cases proceeded. I would handle project management and client relations from Ohio. The hours were flexible around Emma's schedule. I accepted gratefully. The reduced salary still covered our basic needs and gave me the stability to focus on Emma. Starting the remote position felt like the first positive development in weeks. Craig's supervised visitation sessions started the next Saturday. A court-appointed supervisor named Janet sat in a room at the Family Services building while Craig spent 2 hours with Emma. I dropped Emma off and waited in my car in the parking lot. Emma was polite but distant with Craig. She answered his questions with short responses. Craig seemed uncomfortable with the structured environment and Janet's presence. He tried to explain his actions to Emma in ways that blamed me for being gone so long. Janet intervened immediately and redirected the conversation back to neutral topics. After the first session, Emma came out to the car looking tired. She said it was weird having someone watch them the whole time. Craig didn't try to hug her goodbye. The next few sessions followed the same pattern. Craig talked about surface things like school and hobbies. Emma responded minimally. The relationship between them had changed fundamentally, and everyone could feel it. Tessa filed for annulment of her marriage to Craig based on fraud. Ingrid told me about it when the paperwork came through. Tessa was also moving out of state to stay with family in Michigan while the legal proceedings continued. Before she left, she sent me a letter. It arrived in a plain white envelope with no return address. The letter was 2 pages handwritten. Tessa apologized for her role in the situation and expressed hope that Emma would be okay. She said she never meant to hurt anyone and believed everything Craig told her. She was moving away to start over and wanted me to know she was cooperating fully with the prosecutor. Reading the letter stirred complicated feelings. Part of me appreciated the gesture. Part of me was still too angry to forgive. I put the letter in the file with all the other documents and tried not to think about it too much. The insurance company completed their investigation and filed formal charges against Craig for insurance fraud. Bianca called to update me on the outcome. The company was pursuing maximum penalties because Craig's scheme was deliberate and involved falsifying employment documents. He had submitted fake pay stubs and forged my signature on enrollment forms. The insurance fraud charge carried up to 5 years in prison. Bianca said the company wanted to make an example of the case to deter future fraud. This added another serious charge to Craig's growing legal problems. Tristan called the same day to say the prosecutor's office now had enough evidence to proceed with formal indictments. Craig would be arraigned within 2 weeks on multiple felony counts. Everything was moving forward faster than I expected. Ingrid sent me contact information for a credit specialist who handles fraud cases. I called the next morning and spent 3 hours on the phone going through every account Craig opened in my name. The specialist walked me through filing disputes with all 3 credit bureaus and explained I needed to submit police reports, court documents, and sworn statements for each fraudulent account. The paperwork felt endless, but I tackled it methodically, one form at a time. Each dispute required detailed documentation proving I never authorized the accounts or transactions. I spent evenings after Emma went to bed scanning documents and writing statements explaining how Craig accessed my personal information while I worked overseas. The credit specialist warned me the process would take months, and some disputes might get rejected initially, requiring appeals with additional evidence. But every successful dispute would remove another piece of Craig's financial destruction from my credit report. I filed disputes for 6 credit cards, 2 personal loans, and the home equity line of credit. The total fraudulent debt exceeded $90,000 when everything was tallied. Emma's next pediatrician appointment brought better news. Her blood sugar levels had stabilized with consistent insulin doses and proper medication management. The doctor reviewed her charts and noted significant improvement over the past month. Emma sat on the exam table swinging her legs, while the doctor explained that her A1C levels dropped from dangerous territory back into acceptable range. The doctor asked Emma how she felt, and Emma said her stomach didn't hurt as much anymore, and she had more energy at the school. I watched my daughter smile while talking about feeling better, and felt grateful we caught Craig's neglect before it caused permanent damage. The doctor scheduled follow-up appointments every 3 months instead of monthly monitoring. Emma asked if that meant she was doing good, and the doctor confirmed she was managing her diabetes really well. Walking out of the office, Emma held my hand and said she liked that I came to her appointments now instead of Daddy forgetting them. The preliminary hearing for Craig's criminal charges happened on a cold Tuesday morning. I sat in the courtroom with Ingrid while Craig stood before the judge with his public defender. The prosecutor read the charges out loud: bigamy, identity theft, insurance fraud, credit card fraud, forgery. Craig pleaded not guilty to everything despite the mountain of evidence sitting in file boxes behind the prosecutor's table. His attorney stood there looking tired while Craig answered the judge's questions in a flat voice. The judge reviewed the charges and set a trial date for 4 months out. Tristan caught up with me in the hallway after and explained that Craig's not guilty plea was standard positioning for plea deal negotiations. Nobody actually expected this case to go to trial, given how much documented evidence existed. The trial date was basically a deadline to motivate Craig's attorney to negotiate seriously. Tristan said Craig would almost certainly accept a plea deal within the next few weeks once his attorney explained how badly a trial would go for him. I asked what kind of sentence Craig might get, and Tristan said it depended on the final plea agreement, but prison time was definitely on the table. Liam called me 2 days later with news that made my stomach drop. His forensic accounting had uncovered another layer of Craig's fraud. Craig took out a home equity line of credit against my house last year without my knowledge or permission. Liam found the loan documents buried in bank records. Craig forged my signature on the application and borrowed $40,000 against the house equity. The money was gone, spent on who knows what during the months I worked in Dubai. Liam already contacted Tristan to add forgery and additional fraud charges to Craig's case. I asked Liam how Craig managed to forge my signature well enough to fool the bank. Liam explained that Craig had access to my documents and signature examples since we were married, making forgery relatively easy. The bank's verification process should have caught it, but clearly failed. Liam was preparing a detailed report showing the forged signature analysis for the prosecutor. This discovery added another $40,000 to the total amount Craig stole from me. The bank that issued the fraudulent home equity line started their own investigation after Liam's report reached them. A bank representative called to schedule a meeting and review the forged documents. I met with the bank's fraud department and provided handwriting samples plus testimony that I never authorized or signed the loan application. The bank representative admitted their verification process failed to catch the obviously forged signature. They offered to work with me on resolving the debt since their procedures didn't protect me as they should have. The representative said the bank would likely forgive the debt entirely given the clear evidence of forgery and their verification failure. It was a small piece of good news in the middle of the ongoing financial nightmare. $40,000 of fraudulent debt potentially disappearing felt like finally catching a break. Emma's school counselor called and asked to meet about Emma's adjustment. I went to the school the next afternoon and sat in the counselor's office explaining the family situation in general terms. I told the counselor about the separation, the legal proceedings, and that Emma's father wouldn't be around much going forward. The counselor asked if Emma was showing any signs of distress at the school. I explained that Emma was in therapy and seemed to be coping well overall, but still had difficult moments. The counselor assured me the school would provide extra support and monitoring to help Emma through this transition. They would check in with Emma regularly and alert me to any concerns about her academic performance or emotional state. The counselor also offered to coordinate with Emma's therapist if needed to ensure consistent support across all environments. I thanked the counselor and felt relieved knowing Emma had another layer of support at the school. Tristan called the following week to say Craig's attorney approached him about a plea deal. Craig was willing to plead guilty to reduce charges in exchange for a lighter sentence. Tristan explained that as the victim, I had input on whether to accept a plea deal or push for trial. He asked what I wanted to see happen. I told Tristan I wanted Craig to face real consequences for what he did, but I didn't want to put Emma through the trauma of a trial. Tristan said that was reasonable, and he would negotiate for appropriate prison time even with reduced charges. He promised to keep me informed throughout the negotiations and wouldn't agree to anything without my approval. The plea negotiations stretched over several weeks. Tristan called every few days with updates on the back and forth between his office and Craig's attorney. Craig's attorney initially pushed for probation only with no prison time. Tristan rejected that immediately and insisted on actual incarceration given the severity and duration of Craig's crimes. They went back and forth on the length of prison time and which specific charges Craig would plead guilty to. Eventually, they reached a middle ground. Craig would plead guilty to bigamy, identity theft, and fraud charges. In exchange, he would receive a sentence of 3 years in prison with possibility of parole after 18 months. The other charges would be dropped as part of the plea agreement. Tristan called to present this final offer and asked if I could accept it. I sat with the decision for a few days, feeling torn about it. Part of me wanted Craig to face maximum punishment and spend as long as possible in prison for destroying our family and stealing Emma's future. But 3 years felt like adequate time for Emma to heal and adjust without her father's presence. Ingrid reminded me that having Craig in prison would make the divorce and custody proceedings much simpler, since he couldn't fight anything from behind bars. She also pointed out that 3 years was a real sentence, not just a slap on the wrist. I thought about Emma and what would be best for her moving forward. A trial would mean months more of legal proceedings and possibly having to testify about her father. The plea deal would end the criminal case quickly and let us move on with our lives. I called Tristan back and told him I would support the plea deal. Craig accepted the plea agreement and a hearing was scheduled for the formal guilty plea. I attended with Ingrid and watched Craig stand before the judge again. This time when the judge asked how he pleaded, Craig said guilty in a quiet voice. The judge went through each charge individually and questioned Craig directly to ensure he understood what he was admitting to. Did you commit bigamy by marrying another woman while still legally married? Yes. Did you steal your wife's identity to open fraudulent credit accounts? Yes. Did you forge your wife's signature on loan documents? Yes. Craig's voice stayed flat and quiet through the whole process. The judge accepted the guilty plea and scheduled sentencing for 3 weeks later. Craig would remain free on bail until then. He walked out of the courtroom without looking at me. The next 3 weeks crawled by while I waited for the sentencing hearing. Craig's attorney called Ingrid 5 days after the guilty plea with a request. Craig wanted one final unsupervised visit with Emma before sentencing. I refused immediately. Ingrid called me back within an hour to explain my decision to Craig's attorney. She told him that Craig gave up the right to make demands when he committed crimes that put his daughter's health at risk. The attorney didn't argue or push back. He just said he would inform his client and hung up. I felt no guilt about denying Craig that visit. He had 14 months to be a real father while I worked overseas. He chose to spend that time stealing from Emma and building a fake life with someone else. Emma and I fell into a routine during those 3 weeks. I worked from home during her school hours. We made dinner together every evening. I helped with her homework at the kitchen table. We managed her insulin doses and blood sugar checks as a team. One evening while we were washing dishes, Emma asked if Daddy was going to jail. My stomach dropped, but I knew this conversation was coming. I dried my hands on a towel and sat down at the table with her. She climbed into the chair next to me and waited. I explained that Daddy made some really bad choices that hurt our family. I told her he broke laws and took money that wasn't his. I said that when adults break serious laws, they have to face consequences. Sometimes that means going away for a while so they can think about what they did. Emma's eyes filled with tears. She asked how long he would be gone. I told her probably a few years. but we would figure it out together. She cried for a while with her head on my shoulder. Then she pulled back and wiped her eyes. She said she was sad, but also felt better knowing the truth. I held her close and promised I would always be honest with her from now on. The sentencing hearing arrived on a cold Tuesday morning in late November. I wore a navy suit and met Ingrid outside the courthouse at 8:30. We went through security and found seats in the courtroom. Craig was already there with his attorney at the defense table. He looked thinner than 3 weeks ago. His suit hung loose on his frame. The judge entered and everyone stood. The bailiff called the case and we all sat down. The judge reviewed the file for several minutes before looking up at Craig. She asked if he understood he was here for sentencing after pleading guilty to bigamy, identity theft, and fraud. Craig stood and said yes in a quiet voice. The judge then asked me to stand. She said she had reviewed my victim impact statement and wanted to acknowledge the harm Craig's actions caused to me and Emma. She said Emma's medical needs made Craig's theft particularly cruel. I nodded and sat back down. Craig's attorney stood next to Craig and addressed the judge. He talked about Craig's unemployment creating financial stress. He mentioned poor judgment and desperation. He said Craig loved his daughter and never meant to hurt anyone. The judge listened without expression. When the attorney finished, the judge asked Craig if he had anything to say. Craig stood again. He started to speak, but his voice cracked. He said he was sorry and wished he could take it back. The judge cut him off. She said his actions showed a pattern of calculated deception over many months. She said he endangered his daughter's health for personal gain. She said the plea agreement called for 3 years in prison, and she saw no reason to deviate from that recommendation. She sentenced Craig to 3 years with eligibility for parole after 18 months. She also ordered him to pay full restitution for the stolen funds. The bailiff moved toward Craig immediately. Craig glanced back at me as the bailiff took his arm. His face looked pale and scared. I didn't react or change my expression. I just watched as they led him through the side door toward the holding cells. I felt strange sitting there after Craig disappeared. Part of me felt relief that this chapter was finally closing. Emma was safe now. Craig couldn't hurt us anymore from prison. But another part felt sad about how our marriage ended. I never imagined standing in a courtroom watching my husband go to prison. Ingrid touched my arm and asked if I was okay. I said I was fine and ready to move forward. We left the courthouse and went to her office to discuss next steps. The divorce could proceed quickly now that Craig was incarcerated. Ingrid said Craig wouldn't contest anything from prison. She filed the paperwork that afternoon. I would get full custody of Emma. The house stayed in my name since it was never marital property. All remaining assets went to me. Craig was ordered to pay child support once he got out of prison. Ingrid warned me not to count on ever seeing that money. I told her I wasn't. The divorce was finalized exactly 2 months after Craig's sentencing. I got the papers in January and felt nothing except relief. Liam finished his forensic accounting work around the same time. He called and asked me to come to his office to review the findings. I drove over on a Saturday morning while Emma was at a friend's house. Liam spread papers across his conference table and walked me through everything. He had traced most of the stolen money. Some went to daily living expenses for Craig and his fake family. Some went to online gambling sites. Some went to bad investment schemes Craig fell for. The $73,000 from Emma's college fund was almost completely gone. Liam said we could pursue restitution through Craig's prison wages. Inmates make very little money, but the court order required him to pay. We could also search for hidden assets Craig might have stashed somewhere. Liam didn't think we would find much. I thanked him for his thorough work. Every dollar we recovered would go straight into rebuilding Emma's college fund. Emma and I created a new routine over the following months. I worked remotely during her school hours from 8 to 3. When she got home, I closed my laptop and focused completely on her. We cooked dinner together most nights. She liked helping me chop vegetables and stir pots. We did her homework at the kitchen table. Math problems and spelling words spread across the surface. We managed her diabetes care as a team. She learned to check her own blood sugar and tell me the numbers. I handled the insulin doses, but she watched carefully and asked questions. The house slowly started feeling like ours instead of a place haunted by Craig's lies. We rearranged furniture in the living room. We painted Emma's bedroom a soft purple she picked out. We hung new pictures on the walls, small changes that made the space feel fresh and safe. Madeline called me one afternoon in early spring. She wanted to discuss Emma's progress in therapy. We scheduled a phone meeting during Emma's school hours. Madeline said Emma was doing excellent work processing her feelings. She understood now that Craig's choices weren't her fault. She was learning that adults sometimes make terrible decisions that hurt the people they're supposed to protect. Emma still had hard days when she missed her father, or felt angry about what happened. But those days were becoming less common. Madeline believed Emma's natural strength would help her recover fully. She recommended continuing weekly sessions for another few months, then moving to monthly check-ins. I agreed and thanked Madeline for helping Emma through this nightmare. I started my own therapy around the same time. I found a counselor who specialized in betrayal and trust issues. The first session was hard. I cried through most of it while explaining everything Craig did. The therapist listened without judgment. Over the next several weeks, she helped me understand that Craig's actions said everything about his character and nothing about my worth. I had worked hard to support my family. I made sacrifices and sent money home faithfully. Craig's choice to betray that trust was entirely on him. This perspective helped ease the shame I carried. I had blamed myself for not seeing the signs. I wondered if I should have come home sooner or checked on things more carefully. The therapist helped me recognize that Craig was skilled at deception. He lied to everyone, including Tessa. I couldn't have predicted or prevented his choices. 6 months after Craig's sentencing, Emma and I took a weekend trip to a state park 2 hours away. It was our first real vacation together since I came home from working overseas. We packed the car on Friday after school and drove through rolling hills. We checked into a small cabin near the lake. That evening, we hiked a trail through the woods. Emma pointed out birds and interesting rocks. We roasted marshmallows over a campfire and made s'mores. Emma laughed more than I had heard in months. Her genuine joy felt like proof we were healing. On Saturday, we rented a canoe and paddled across the calm water. Emma sat in front and helped steer. The sun was warm on our faces. We didn't talk much. We just enjoyed being together in a peaceful place. That night, we played cards in the cabin and ate pizza. Emma fell asleep early, exhausted from fresh air and activity. I sat on the porch watching stars appear and felt something shift inside me. We were going to be okay. Better than okay. We were building something real and good together. The credit report updates started arriving 2 months after I filed the disputes. I sat at my kitchen table opening envelope after envelope, each one showing another fraudulent account marked as removed. The department store card I never opened, gone. The personal loan in my name that Craig took out, deleted. My credit score climbed from the low 500s back toward 650, then 680. It wasn't perfect yet, but the trajectory felt like victory. I drove to a different bank across town, one Craig never used, and opened a checking account with just my name on it. The banker handed me a temporary debit card and I held it like it meant something, because it did. This account was mine alone. Nobody could touch it but me. The first restitution payment showed up 3 weeks later. I opened the envelope from the State Corrections Department and found a check for $73. I stared at it for a long time. Craig stole $140,000 from our family, and the state was sending me $73 from his prison wages. It would take him decades to repay even a fraction of what he took. But I drove to the bank anyway and deposited that check into Emma's new college fund. Every dollar counted. Every payment was proof that actions have consequences, even if those consequences came slowly. Emma was doing her homework at the dining room table one afternoon when she looked up and asked if she could write a letter to Daddy. My stomach tightened, but I kept my voice calm and asked what she wanted to say. She shrugged and said she didn't know. She just had feelings that were confusing, and maybe writing them down would help. I called Madeline that evening and explained what Emma wanted to do. Madeline thought it was actually a good idea, therapeutic even. Emma didn't have to send the letter, but the act of writing could help her process her complex emotions about Craig. The next Saturday, Emma sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and pen. She wrote for almost an hour, stopping sometimes to think or wipe her eyes. When she finished, she folded the pages and put them in her desk drawer. She told me later that she wrote about feeling confused and hurt, but also missing the good times they used to have before everything fell apart. The letter helped her sort through feelings she didn't have words for before. My work email pinged during a Tuesday morning video call. My supervisor in Dubai wanted to schedule a one-on-one meeting to discuss my performance and future with the company. I felt nervous preparing for that call, worried they might be unhappy with my reduced productivity during the legal crisis. Instead, my supervisor opened the meeting by thanking me for my dedication and offering me a promotion to regional manager. The position was permanently remote, meaning I could stay in Ohio with Emma while managing teams across multiple countries. The salary increase was substantial, almost 30% more than my current pay. I accepted immediately and thanked them for their continued support during the hardest year of my life. This promotion meant financial stability would return much faster than I'd hoped. The holidays approached, and I realized Emma and I needed to create new traditions that were just ours. We couldn't recreate the past or pretend Craig's absence didn't change things. So we started fresh. Emma and I spent a Saturday afternoon baking sugar cookies and decorating them with way too much frosting and sprinkles. We hung lights around the windows and put up a small tree in the living room. Emma picked out every ornament and told me where each one should go. I invited Deb over for dinner and we made a feast together, the three of us cooking and laughing in the kitchen. Emma seemed lighter that evening, more herself than she had been in over a year. After Deb went home, Emma hugged me and said this was a good Christmas, maybe even better than before because it was just us, and we didn't have to worry about Daddy being mad about something. The letter from the bank arrived in January. I opened it expecting another bill or statement, but instead found a notification that the home equity line of credit had been forgiven. The bank's investigation confirmed the signature was forged, and their verification process had failed to catch it. They were writing off the entire $40,000 debt. I had to read the letter 3 times before I believed it. $40,000 of fraudulent debt, gone. I called Liam immediately and thanked him for the thorough documentation he provided during the investigation. His forensic accounting work made this outcome possible. This felt like a massive victory, like I could finally breathe without that weight pressing down on me. 1 year after Craig's sentencing, Emma and I drove to Madeline's office for what she called a final check-in session. Madeline spent an hour talking with Emma while I waited in the lobby. When they came out, Madeline asked to speak with me privately. She told me Emma's progress was remarkable. She had developed healthy coping skills and a strong understanding that she wasn't responsible for the family situation. Madeline believed Emma no longer needed regular therapy, but provided a list of resources if Emma ever needed support in the future. Emma had done the hard work of processing her trauma and was ready to move forward. I thanked Madeline for everything she did to help Emma through the worst time in her young life. I woke up one morning in February and realized something had changed. I had slept through the entire night without waking up anxious about finances or Craig's next betrayal. The constant stress that defined my last year in Dubai and the months after returning had finally eased. My body wasn't in fight or flight mode anymore. Emma and I were building a stable, peaceful life together, and that felt like the best possible outcome after everything Craig tried to destroy. We had routines now. We had security. We had each other, and that was enough. Emma burst through the front door one afternoon waving her report card. Straight A's across every subject. Her teacher included a note praising Emma's positive attitude and hard work. I read that note 3 times, feeling proud of how Emma succeeded despite everything she had been through. We celebrated with her favorite dinner, homemade mac and cheese with chicken nuggets, and picked out a movie to watch together. Just the 2 of us curled up on the couch with popcorn, enjoying a simple evening that felt perfect. Deb came over for coffee one evening after Emma went to bed. We sat at the kitchen table talking about everything and nothing when Deb suddenly got serious. She told me she was proud of how I handled everything with strength and grace. I felt my throat tighten because I didn't always feel strong or graceful. But Deb reminded me that I was there from the very beginning, making that first reconnaissance mission to verify what Craig was doing. Her friendship and support were crucial during the darkest days when I felt completely alone. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand, making sure she knew how much her help meant to me and Emma. A few weeks later, I got an email from the bank about Emma's college fund account. I opened it at my desk during my lunch break and stared at the balance for a solid minute. $15,000. It wasn't the $73,000 Craig stole, not even close. But seeing that number felt like proof we were actually rebuilding something real. The restitution payments from Craig's prison wages kept trickling in, $70 or $80 every few months, and I added what I could from my salary. I logged into the account and transferred another $200, then watched the balance update. Every dollar going into that fund meant Emma would have choices someday. She could go to college or trade school or whatever she wanted, and Craig's theft wouldn't take that future away from her. I closed my laptop and went to pick Emma up from the school, feeling lighter than I had in months. 2 years after I came home from Dubai and found Craig's second family in my house, Emma and I were genuinely doing great. She turned 10 last month and had a birthday party with 6 friends from the school, all of them laughing in our backyard while I grilled hot dogs. Her diabetes management was solid now. She checked her blood sugar on schedule, knew how to adjust her insulin, and her last doctor visit showed perfect A1C levels. I got promoted again at work, this time to senior regional manager with a salary that let us save money every month and still have enough for Emma's activities and occasional trips. The house felt completely different now, like it belonged to us instead of being haunted by Craig's betrayals. We painted Emma's room her favorite purple color. We hung new pictures in the living room. We created our own routines and traditions that had nothing to do with Craig or the life we used to have. Emma came home from the school yesterday talking about trying out for the soccer team, and I signed the permission form right there at the kitchen table. We were building something honest and good, just the 2 of us. Craig tried to destroy our family with his lies and theft, but instead we became stronger. We weren't just getting by anymore. We were actually happy, and that felt like the biggest victory of all.